DeFi by Design, where we talk all things blockchain and cryptocurrency while striving to educate, empower, and enrich.
What's going on, guys? Welcome back to DeFi by Design podcast, episode 102, celebrating GM100 two podcasts ago. Last podcast, we had Brian Pellegrino from Layer Zero Labs, had a really interesting conversation about agnostic DeFi protocol design, trustless and permissionless protocols, kind of how Layer Zero is trying to take over the digital world. Today, we're shifting gears a bit, talking to the team from Gearbox, more of an OG type of DeFi protocol, really one of those teams that you know is just going to keep building and is going to keep delivering solid products and will reap the rewards in the kind of DeFi cycle of ETH yields and more speculation. So very excited today to dive into a variety of topics from leverage yield farming, ETHCC, curve, some of the recent drama going on, as well as other topics. So Rob, good morning, bro.
GM, brothers and sisters, love to have everyone here listening. Thank you. Yeah, like Andy said, this is episode 102. I'm super hyped because we're just going to keep it rolling. You know, we had 100 great episodes, and I feel like we're just steadily on the rise in terms of guests, quality, conversations, thoughts, ideas, industry, prices, everything's up, vibes up. So super stoked to have 𝗵𝗶𝗴𝗵 and 𝗵𝗶𝗃 on with us today. The contributors, core contributors, we're going to hear what they do contribute to Gearbox. What Gearbox is. We're going to dive into some of the curve, some of the RCAM things as well. So stay tuned, grab a coffee or a beer or something and kick back, relax. And we'll kick it over to 𝗵𝗶𝗴𝗵 to introduce himself and introduce Gearbox. 𝗵𝗶𝗴𝗵, how you feeling today?
I'm good. How are you? I'm 𝗵𝗶𝗴𝗵. I'm chief propagandist at Gearbox, basically. Memes and videos and all that good stuff. Gearbox is a composable leverage protocol. I will leave it to 𝗃𝗍 to describe what it is exactly we do, but basically the core idea is whatever you want to do in DeFi, our goal is to be able to like lever it up for you. Like we eventually want to be the leverage layer for all of DeFi that's at least all of DeFi that's safe. Right now we're kind of primarily like helping people leverage on yield farming strategies, but trading is coming soon too, and V3 at the end of the year. Yeah, good to talk to you guys today.
Hey everybody, my name is 𝗃𝗍. I'm responsible for product and math side at Gearbox. In terms of protocol, we're building composable leverage since I guess 2021. Nice to meet you, everybody.
Nice. So were you guys on the team in the earliest days or in the earliest months? Kind of when did you guys join?
Protocol started as one of the winners at Global Hackathon in early 2021. 𝗵𝗶𝗃𝗵 was original founder and inventor of Gearbox. Later, a little bit like right after Global Hackathon, I and ivangbi joined the team. So we start pushing the protocol together, just three of us. In late 2021, in December, we launched first version. And after that, I guess 𝗵𝗶𝗴𝗵 and some other cool guys joined the team, and we start working together on protocol. Yeah.
Nice. Cool. Yeah. I was just curious as to kind of how it started. Because I think 𝗵𝗶𝗴𝗵 might have been the first iteration of leverage yield farming. Back in like DeFi summer, and maybe you guys were kind of right around there as well. I'm kind of curious why you guys think leverage yield farming is important. What's the main use case?
So it's not just yield farming that we want to do. Our goal, the way that the geniuses behind Gearbox, 𝗃𝗍 and 𝗵𝗃𝗃, and I guess Ivan's not really a genius, he's kind of a moron, but 𝗃𝗍 and 𝗵𝗃𝗃 are definitely like giga brains. And the way that they approached the problem of leverage in DeFi is slightly different than the way that kind of 𝗵𝗶𝗴𝗵 did, right? So 𝗵𝗶𝗴𝗵, essentially you can think of each of their leverage strategies as a separate vault, almost in the same way that like you have a Yearn vault and then you have a specific 𝗵𝗶𝗴𝗵 strategy dedicated to a specific Yearn vault. And so 𝗵𝗶𝗴𝗵 also has many strategies, but those pools are all like separated, right? Our goal at Gearbox is basically to act as a layer, or you can think of it almost as like a leveraged smart wallet, although I've been told sometimes to not call it that, but it's like the easiest way to explain it. Like you put your money into what we call a credit account, like a Gearbox credit account, which is kind of like a new DeFi primitive, or it's not new anymore, but a DeFi primitive. And then from within that credit account, you can farm, you can trade, you can do multiple different strategies. It's not like you're not depositing it into just one vault. You can do multiple different things from that credit account. And when you close that credit account, whether you made money or lost money, like you can just get like whatever gains you made, you can take out of there, right? So the difference between 𝗵𝗶𝗴𝗵 and Gearbox is essentially like, if I want to put my money into a credit account, and so for example, you could take a position where it's like you want to long ETH and then also stake it, right? So you put up like USDC collateral, then you buy ETH in your credit account on leverage. So you put up USDC collateral, you borrow USDC, use that USDC to buy ETH, and then also stake that ETH. That's something that like you can't do in 𝗵𝗶𝗴𝗵. They would have to create a specific strategy for you to be able to do that. But because of the way Mikkel and 𝗂𝗀𝗀 and the other guys designed the credit account, it's like it's actually generalized. So the more strategies we add, the more strategies we integrate, like the more the possibilities of what you can do within your credit account multiply exponentially, right? So for example, in the future, if we're to say like there was something cool that you could do with your staked ETH and it was like relatively safe within DeFi, maybe we'd integrate that. And then not only can you like long ETH and then stake it, maybe you can take that staked ETH and like, for example, put it in EigenLayer or something like that, right? And once we have that EigenLayer integration, then you can do that. You don't have to kind of reinvent the wheel every time, release a new strategy, and it's not like vault by vault. It's like really generalized. And that's really the goal of Gearbox.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah, actually, like original idea was like leveraging Uniswap. So we are, I'd say in the first days, more focused on trading on top of Uniswap. And we thought like, okay, it would be cool if you can trade on Uniswap with some leverage, yeah, because like Uniswap in early 2021 is like has very good traction in that days, and a lot of different interesting tokens you can find there to trade on. So it's cool to have leverage on it. So yeah, after that we like find the idea how it works with this credit account, smart wallet design, and later discussing with other contributors, with other smart peoples in community, we decide that okay, it could be actually a generalized way to have leverage for any DeFi protocol. And yeah, as 𝗵𝗶𝗴𝗵 said, now we look at Gearbox like, yeah, it looks like leverage layer for DeFi space actually. And later it could be integrated to any use case that we can like see around our space.
Yeah. One of our current partners is Raft, and they're doing effectively leveraged yield farming for staked ETH by being able to borrow R, which is a stable coin against staked ETH. Similarly, other kind of LSDFi protocols, if you will, have kind of gone on a similar path, trying to launch on basically a yield-bearing staked ETH collateral-based stablecoin. I'm curious if you guys are currently engaging in some kind of that, let's say the LSDFi wars that our community can participate in Gearbox, or if you have plans to, as well as your current mental model regarding the state of kind of staked ETH and how different protocols are trying to attempt different types of strategies to attract liquidity based on, you know, rehypothecation, extra yield, collateral-backed stablecoins, et cetera. So kind of three parts there. What you guys are doing now, if any, what's in the books, and overall your mental model.
I'd say we are agnostic in terms of different DeFi. So actually, for us as a protocol, there is no big difference between all of them. So it depends on the user, I guess, to choose what kind of DeFi they prefer, where to put money, and so on. In my point of view, like it's interesting use cases could be arising later in Gearbox, because like for now, I guess different protocols provide leveraging of LSD, while actually after launch of like EigenLayer and some other stuff that provide different staking opportunities on top of LSDFi, that could be very interesting, because like for risk seekers, they could actually borrow some LSD tokens and provide a more risky farm in more risky staking, but actually as a result get some additional yield for using such kind of leverage. While for original users who just want to hold LSD fi tokens, it could be a good opportunity, because they could deposit as liquidity providers, get some passive yield, do nothing, no additional risk for using it in different staking services, which actually were provided by EigenLayer, but actually additional yield that they get as a result of this. Yeah, so could be very interesting, I guess, such kind of use cases.
Yeah, restaking is particularly interesting, especially once you can restake into other validators and then use ETH that is securing ETH because it's in an ETH validator, and restake it into another network and help secure that network as well. I'm curious, Gearbox application to LSDFi is one particular use case. I'm curious in general how Gearbox manages its leverage layer. Like, I think what we've seen in leverage is over collateralization, where you have some collateral and you can borrow against it up to that collateral value. Is Gearbox similar in the sense that everyone has to be over collateralized, or is Gearbox a little bit different in the credit accounts?
Yeah, of course, Gearbox as protocol overall over collateralized. So as Amplis earlier said about smart contract wallet, it actually designed like you put some collateral, borrow X5, even X10 funds on it, and then you can put this money to different protocols, to different LPs, farms, whatever. But as a result, all of this liquidity LP tokens actually lay down in the same smart contract wallet. So it's like it can be used as collateral for your debt. So overall system over collateralized, while you have up to X10 more capital to farm or trade. So in terms of protocol, it's like safe model, I'd say, because like as you can see from last CeFi closes here, under collateralized lending is something very, very risky, and sometimes you can't even predict very black swan. So in terms of Gearbox, everything is transparent. You can check your smart contract wallet. Protocol can check positions of every debt and see that everything is secured. In terms of how to be sure that protocol parameters for understanding these overall trade parameters are safe, of course, it's like, I'd say, mass task, and to build a lot of different infrastructure here to help solve this stack, to check in real time that everything works as planned, that there is no any kind of bad events, that liquidity in the market like not drown. Yeah, so it's like a lot of backend infrastructure that launched by different community members and check that everything works as planned.
And when you guys make an integration, I think it's really innovative what you guys have done to allow people to like ×5 or ×10 the collateral that they have, because you almost build in like the folding strategy. Because when you go and you deposit, you borrow, you get some debt, and then you deposit that debt into another protocol, it becomes potential collateral. And you guys almost build that into the smart contract credit account. because you take the debt and then you almost fold it directly back into the collateral, which allows you to continue borrowing, and even more, you can even borrow more than the original collateral that you deposited. So I think it's quite innovative what you guys have done to allow protocols to borrow up to ×5 or ×10, and build in some of those leverage strategies. And I'm curious, like, where are you guys planning on going from here? You know, you started with leverage yield farming, letting people kind of leverage up their LP tokens and get more yield. And now you're a little bit more general. You're letting almost, you know, any kind of smart contract that you have integrated, interact with your leverage layer. So like, what are you guys now looking for in terms of integrations? Is it LSDeFi? Is it other money markets? When you guys are kind of looking at the scope of DeFi, who and what industries are most appealing to integrate?
So I think what the devs have been working on for the past, I don't know, 6 months or something, is V3. And essentially what V3 is going to allow us to do. So like previously with V2, essentially we integrated a bunch of like the big yield farming strategies, or rather the places where the big yield farming strategies exist, right? So Yearn, Curve, Convex, Lidos, Staked ETH, etc. But like, not a problem exactly, but one kind of hurdle that we needed to overcome was, how do we allow people to put their money into like less well-known, riskier strategies so that they can like juice their yields on a broader array of strategies, and we could do more and more integrations without kind of introducing a level of risk to the whole system that like we deem unsafe, right? So the way that we've come up to do that is essentially like set a global kind of quota on specific strategies or specific assets, such that like Gearbox protocol as a whole does not have more than like X amount of exposure to this asset. And the reason why we need to do that is because when you think about liquidations, like there's like different assets have different amounts of liquidity, right? So if you're talking about adding a new asset, we need a quota such that even if we liquidate all of that asset that exists in Gearbox protocol, the price is not going to drop so much that we end up with bad debt. Does that make sense? So these quotas are really going to make a huge difference in terms of just the number of integrations that we can add. Because like previously we could only add big things because there wasn't this like high level overall protocol risk quota for each of the assets. So we could only add really, really big things where the liquidity is like, there's loads and loads of it. So we don't have to worry. But now with V3, which the devs are working on, which I think like we're going to say like November, December, probably. Ilgiz will correct me if I'm wrong there. We're going to be able to introduce quotas. And the cool thing about quotas is we've kind of, we're introducing some novel tokenomics that are built into how these quotas are allocated as well. So basically like the goal is how, like, we're going to get to a point where we can start adding not just the really well-known strategies, but also like kind of like we talk about blue chip, right? I would say everything in Gearbox right now is blue chip. Even these like less than blue chip kind of mid-tier strategies, we can add all of them. We can integrate stuff safely, which is the most important thing, with the V3 upgrade. And then once that happens, then I think we're going to start banging out integrations and just try to like integrate everything that we think is reasonably safe, which I'm really looking forward to. Because again, like once you have loads of integrations, the things you can do are like the possibilities of what you can do increase exponentially.
Yeah. So a couple points that ring to mind that I'd love to hear more about as far as integrations and expansions go. Because I'm totally on the same page with you. First, with regards to kind of making sure that should you add a collateral type or an asset, there needs to be enough secondary market liquidity to not get burned as a user, but also as a protocol. And so right now, for example, like that kind of 𝗵𝗵𝗶𝗵𝗵 bad debt drama is just like the biggest example that we currently have about kind of risking different types of LTV values with a potential collateral type that may not have the deepest liquidity. So certainly on the same page there. And I feel like you guys have the brains and the knowledge and the experience in DeFi to kind of be able to run that kind of math and understand, kind of the risk parameters for each type, as well as kind of have the DAO as a backup checks and balances to make sure that, let's just say there isn't too much degen activity happening, but I am a fan of degen activity, don't get me wrong. But more so to where I want to take this on the integration and expansion side. You guys recently just integrated Curve V2 pools. I saw about 4 or 5 different LP pairs. Those are super blue chip from my perspective, Curve and the tokens. So I'd love to just hear about the high APYs there, how and kind of why everything that happens on the integration side still goes through the DAO. If there's any kind of light that you want to share on the DAO's involvement in this specific integration, would love to hear that. And then I've got one more question about extending to L2s, but we'll come back to that. So yeah, we would love to hear more about this recent integration.
Ilkis, you want to take this one?
Yeah, actually, a little bit network lag, I guess. Yeah, I think Curve V2 pools is like something very interesting. Yeah, so it has very good yield. So actually, for users, it could be something that they are looking for leverage here, because like what we heard from our users, like yeah, they want to get more risk on themselves, be more again, have more yield as a result. So I guess Curve V2 and Tate, I guess, will be ready to deploy right after it some balancer pools, and our integration also could be very interesting opportunity for active degens to find very juicy yields. Yeah, of course, getting some risk on themselves, but I guess that's a lot of degens in the market is ready to get on themselves.
And
and you went on mute there, but I'll kind of take it from there. I think there was a question about L2s and like, is that part of your expansion strategy? How do you approach some network integrations?
100% L2s are on our mind, let's say. So this again is something that is going to be made possible with V3. Again, because of the risk quota. So what you're seeing in L2s is like very like there's a lot of opportunities there, but liquidity is not as deep as mainnet, right? So like how do we kind of launch Gearbox on an L2 where liquidity is not as deep, but let's say like there's access to higher yields or like more interesting things you can do, and like the solution is similar to like how do we integrate kind of non-blue chip but like mid-tier protocols on mainnet. It's we need to introduce these risk quotas, and once we do that, then L2 expansion becomes very possible. So we're not like super focused on it at the moment, but I think once we get closer to V3, it's definitely something that we will start kind of discussing internally and putting into the DAO to see like what the DAO thinks of like, should we do Arbitrum? Should we do Optimism? Should we do, ZK VM, Stark? I mean, all the different L2s, like, and like probably by then Scroll and everything else will be out. So it's exciting times ahead. Could we just deploy to all of them? Possibly. We'll see.
Dude, so good.
Yeah. We'll see
Dude,
who gives the most interesting incentives,
Yeah, exactly. Dude, your comment on the space was so good, man. Trying to get ZKX from Starknet and ZKM guys going head to head. They were like, no, we won't do this. And then like Hamza from ZKVM was like, nah, dude, I'll definitely do this. Like 𝗬𝗂𝗵𝗵 is better. And it's just like, dude, come on. I think Arbitrum is the best spot for you guys to go first, though. Just as a general, like, I guess, advice. I think that is where you'll have the highest amount of DeFi yield farm users, or let's just say yield farm for lack of a better term, DeFi power users. At least in my experience, that's where I've been.
Yeah, that's where GMX is, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
So on the trading side, probably there's not much to integrate there, but on the GLP side, I think that would be an interesting, like leverage GLP returns might be an interesting thing to look at. Yeah, I think Arbitrum is definitely interesting. I think there's some cool stuff on Optimism. Yeah.
I guess GMX V2 actually could be very interesting. Just curious when they launch to check it actually integrate
soon.
The website.
Let me tell you, like,
is like worse than the Ethereum Foundation.
All the stuff that I say, is like bullshit. But whatever Ilgiz says, that's alpha. So listeners, like, take that into account.
When 𝗵𝗶 says it, it's propaganda. When Ilgiz says
that's correct. Yeah, it's actually happening. If Ilgiz says it, it's actually like it's actually gonna happen. You know.
So Ilgiz, like, let's say you look at GMX V2, you love it, right? Like, what's the process for getting that? Does the entire DAO have to kind of go through that process, or like what is the process once you establish like this looks like a cool integration? What's the process from there?
Yeah, actually, there is like some tech work should be done. Yeah. So first of all, of course, we need some adapters to this new protocol. But for example, if there is I just don't check it yet. If, for example, GMX pools will be in using 𝗫𝗎𝐶 26 standard, so actually maybe there is no need any kind of development on top of it. We can use one of our existing adapters. That's like first stuff that should be built. Second stuff, how to price correctly LP token for this asset, and it could be solved in different ways. We have some pre-built oracles for different LP tokens that we use already in our system. It could be some semi-off-chain oracles types, like for example, Redstone provider could build on top of, and we can use it later. So there are different options we have. But yeah, prerequisite here, like oracles and adapters. And after that, we need governance approval, because every step, every deployment should be approved by Gearbox governance, and later current contracts will be integrated with some pre-deployed new ones. And after that, it's ready. And third step maybe also to check, it's like some check infrastructure layer, like liquidations, some backend services, some front-end application stuff that also should be checked, but I guess it's not a big deal.
Got it. Makes sense. So like first there's kind of like the risk quota, you know, to even be considered. And then you have to make sure that the technical specifications are there. You have to make sure that there's Oracle price feeds, that there's adapters, that the technology is somewhat compatible with Gearbox's existing technology. And then if all of those boxes are checked, it goes to governance, and basically the community has the last right to refuse or approve any integration.
Yeah.
Very cool.
I just want to highlight, we also have one stage of the process is we involve RiskDAO. They're like these super smart, like risk analysts, chads basically, who do all this complicated math to make sure that like everything is as safe as possible. And just shout out to those guys, because if you read their like the stuff that they post on our forum, and also like the internal chats that we have with them, they're really on top of stuff, like gigabrains. But like we take risk really seriously. Definitely want to like keep our users as safe as possible.
Yeah, RiskDAO team and some of our backend developers built a lot of cool infrastructure. Like we check real-time data from a lot of different sources, like current prices, current liquidity size on the axis, on axis, all the parameters set and changes, all events that could happen in our protocol. For now, we check any kind of different fraudulent behavior on top of protocol. So a lot of like happens and tracks on real-time data. And if, for example, we see something malicious, some robots just could pause system and say, okay, guys, you should have a look on this. Maybe something bad happens. So all of this, of course, should be checked before any new launch of farming opportunity or trading token, that all of this data governed and works correctly.
Yeah.
Does the sorry, and I was on mute, but I got one more follow-up question on this integration process. Does the OP stack and kind of like these like almost like roll up in a box type of solutions, does that make it much easier to integrate the projects that end up deploying on top of those OP stacks? And Arbitrum is now deploying their stack. You know, because those are now standardized, does it make integrations of the projects that deploy on those stacks much easier?
I'm not sure. I always thought that OP stack and Arbitrum stack, it's more focused on those who want to launch their own rollup on top of using actually this stack. Yeah. So I guess it's like a little bit different layer of Web3 infrastructure. We actually focused on protocols who deploy their protocols to this infrastructure. So I guess, for example, Base launch their own rollup using OP stack, and we talk to them, and it could be something interesting, for example, for Gearbox to deploy our protocol there. But for us, it's prerequisite because we don't provide end product actually. Yeah, we provide leverage layer for other protocols. So in order to deploy our protocol, we should be sure that there is enough different protocols and users wanted to get leverage on top of it. So for example, if Base launch and there is no any kind of protocol at all, it doesn't make sense for us to deploy there. But if Uni comes there, 𝗍 comes there, a lot of different protocols deploy there. Okay, for us, it makes sense. Now go there and provide leverage for all of these protocols.
That makes sense.
I think I'm going to connect you guys. You go ahead, Rod.
The only other thing I'll add is that if there is protocols that launch on Base, another one that uses the OP stack is like Mantle, right? And there's not protocols there yet, but because they both use the OP stack, it makes sense that they already have the adapters, they already have the oracles and the infrastructure that Gearbox needs in order to make a type of integration.
Dude, that's what makes like the OP stack. And I just got pitched by a buddy about he's raising for an L2. Literally L2 new rollups are going to be the new L1s of this cycle. It's literally happening already. I mean, we are the rollup. And he's building on the OP stack, and it has all that tech that's kind of ready, to go. And that's why also, again, I think Arbitrum is the best place for you guys to port as well. And then also, I'm going to connect you guys with Maverick Protocol if you're not already, because they do like concentrated liquidity and directional liquidity, and you guys could do some really sick leverage LP strategies in a concentrated and directional liquidity environment, which would allow users to have like basically a leveraged LP with low impermanent loss and potential crazy upside. So that would be super interesting. I'm not sure if you guys are in touch, but we'll do that after. Want to shift gears here and talk about a really pressing issue in DeFi, which is the effect of liquidity mining on governance token prices. Pretty much every DeFi protocol since 2020 has had a really rough looking chart, in addition to the rest of crypto. Don't get me wrong here, but really there was a lot of inflation and a lot of emissions that came out of DeFi summer and 2021. And so now we're starting to realize, like, okay, we have to figure out how to incentivize sticky liquidity without just giving away tokens for kind of like basically for like renting liquidity, kind of for nothing. So I've got a really interesting thread up here that you guys put together, and I'd like to go through it. So confirm that you can see my window.
Yep. Yeah, I can see it.
Okay, fantastic. Fantastic. So how to eventually fade out liquidity mining emissions and organically grow the lending market for Gearbox. So I guess I would love if you guys want to just kind of walk through our audience through this and kind of explain what you guys are trying to achieve here with fading out emissions and organically growing the market.
So I think for any lending market, you have two sides, right? You have the borrower side and the lending side, like to put it simply. And there needs to be kind of an attractive proposition for both of those parties. And up till now, well, just in DeFi in general, I think yield for like incentives, let's say token incentives, have been used as a way to grease or like lube up the smoothness of balancing out the demand for borrowing and lending, right? Because whilst you're building a protocol, especially a new DeFi protocol, and DeFi itself is like relatively new, it's only been a few years, like you want to get as many users as possible and figure out like what it is that the users want, right? And token incentives are a great way to do that. You can try a bunch of different things, see what people actually want to use, and then slowly ramp down the token incentives. So like from a Gearbox perspective, I think we found like good user interest and kind of semi, like Ivan often says, like we're like halfway to product market fit. Like we have on the leverage side, there's definitely demand, right? Like people want to use the leverage side. They want to borrow, like the credit accounts make sense. And like who doesn't want to like 5x leverage staked ETH, for example? Like why wouldn't you do that? Especially now that withdrawals are enabled, right? So that's kind of a no-brainer. The problem is like, okay, how do we have that and also make the lending side attractive? And like up till now, what we've been doing is, okay, so we have token incentives on the lending side so that we have a good balance of borrowing and lending, right? Because if you don't have enough lenders, then the cost of borrow like spikes up and then borrowing becomes unattractive. So with the upcoming developments in Gearbox, which includes introducing new strategies, V3 and all that, what we're trying to do is make it so that there are a bunch of new things that you can do in Gearbox where when you borrow, your yields are going to be even higher, which then justifies then you as a borrower, you can justify to yourself paying a higher rate for the borrow, which then means that lenders can receive more organically, and therefore we can lower or remove the token incentives. Does that make sense? So like essentially TLDR, I think we have like good user interest and are close to product market fit on the borrowing side. Like the thing makes sense. How do we also get that on the lending side? And the token incentives have been the gap to bridge that. And as we try to figure out like how we can make the numbers work so that borrowing and lending are both attractive to different kinds of users, we can then remove the token incentives and it can all be organic.
Interesting. Okay, so it's all about equilibrium then. Basically trying to find like, you guys have almost conducted experiments to try to figure out where that kind of happy medium lies between keeping lenders on the market to keep liquidity there while giving them good enough rate plus a little bit of token emissions, kind of as shown here, but then also like making sure that the borrowers are not paying extravagant amounts as well, because they really wouldn't want to borrow if they were paying that much and there was other competitors. So that's kind of like the problem where we're aiming to solve here, and that's what we see in these graphics. But this is kind of what we're seeing here, right?
Yeah, that's exactly right. And like the one thing I will say is one of the kind of hurdles that we've had to overcome, right, is fucking Jerome Powell has raised rates, right? So your risk, like you see on the graph there, the risk-free rate, that used to be like essentially negative or zero, right? Like functionally negative. But now that rates have gone up, right? You can park your US dollars in a bank account and get like 2 or 3%. right? So then like everything else your yields have to go up for it to be attractive to kind of the safest user, right? So I think that's actually been a challenge for all of DeFi, and maybe not discussed, but like, well, I think like your kind of average degen is not thinking about that, but like I think sophisticated players are definitely like if you look at degen Spartan, right? He's been talking about this. Like, why would I put my money into USDC when I can just have it in USD in a bank account? Like, that's what we're coming up against, and that's fine because like that's macro, and like if DeFi is going to work, we can't just function in a zero interest rate environment. But when you're kind of like bootstrapping a protocol, it definitely like introduces hurdles. Like, how do you, especially on the lending side, like the yields are lower on the lending side than the borrowing side, right? Because it's supposedly it's less risk. But like, how do you make that an attractive yield to risk proposition compared to 3 or 4% in a USD bank account?
My buddy was just texting me about that. He was asking me about stablecoin yield today, and I was like, dude, why would you do that? Why not just do US Treasuries at 5%?
Yeah, exactly.
Especially with the low time frame.
Yeah. So like, the equilibrium in that graph has moved basically.
Yeah.
And so we have to move with it.
And I think that we should get. I mean, that's important, but even more important, I think, Rob, you can go ahead if you like, but I think we got to talk on the pressing problem of solving liquidity mining, kind of what that kind of trilemma looks like, and you guys are looking at it. But Rob, if you have something on that last topic, please.
I think it's in line with kind of like what you're getting at, which is like how we solve liquidity mining. Like, there's the added risk of keeping funds on chain, and that's going to move the line more than the risk-free rate, right? So like there has to be some added reward, which we call liquidity mining, in order to like keep funds on chain. So like, I guess how much, like, 𝗵𝗶𝗴𝗵, you say people don't really talk about it like in DeFi, and I think you're right. So let's talk about it. You know, like how much do you think additional yield is required in order to, and we're kind of looking at it, right? Like if you were to quantify kind of like what that liquidity mining span looks like how much is that? What have you kind of learned from the experiments that you guys have conducted with adjusting lending rates on Gearbox?
So I think there's like different ways to approach this question. Like I can't pinpoint like a specific number of, okay, if you're kind of a relatively risk averse user and the things that you're choosing between are like US Treasuries, bank account, or USDC on a safe protocol, right? Like how much more yield does that person want? I can't answer that. It depends on the specific person, right? That's their own risk curve, and also they have to judge how risky Gearbox lending is, right? Like we've been good so far, but who knows? It's DeFi, anything can happen. So like each user is going to be different. We just got to capture enough of those users where the risk reward proposition is worth it. But the other thing I will say is like, there's a big variable here, which is in a bear market, token incentives to you, that token is like number go down, right? Like maybe it's worth something when you get it, like when you see that number building up and you're like claiming the tokens, but you're probably dumping those tokens immediately because you're like, it's a bear market. These tokens are just going to keep going down. Whereas in a bull market, now we're talking something different because like I'm not trying to pump the token or whatever, but if you're getting gear for lending, right, in a bull market, maybe you're thinking, okay, it's this price now, but if I hold this token, DeFi Summer 2.0, which
farm hold stake, baby, farm hold stake.
Exactly, like that then like the risk reward calculation changes, right? Because then you have upside. In bear market, there's no upside. Everybody's sad. You know, you're dumping tokens on everybody else. It's a race to the bottom. In a bull market, it's a different proposition altogether. So like if we're entering a bull market, I think that also changes the risk calculus that some of these more risk averse depositors are gonna kind of like how they see the situation. So like I can't answer you in terms of how much more yield. I think it's probably like a few percent, right? Like if you look at corporate bond yields versus kind of US Treasury yields, it's like a reasonably good company. It's like 3-4%, something like that, above risk-free rate. So So I would imagine it's like not too dissimilar in DeFi, or at least as we become kind of more serious people, it will kind of converge to that. But I think like the possibility of the upside on tokens, once that comes back, then we're talking about a very different game.
Yeah, and you almost don't have to incentivize so many emissions as well. While surely you want to compete with other protocols to get the liquidity, if you feel that the bull market is kind of on the horizon, less APY for a larger future APY if people hold is kind of a win-win for everybody. So that's kind of an interesting mental model as well. Also, there's this idea of options liquidity mining where you're basically farming call options on a token. So again, during a kind of bullish kind of sentiment or cycle, those also become very attractive from a protocol emissions level. I'm not sure if you guys have any thoughts on that, or if you guys are looking to implement that with V3. Something that I would definitely look into though.
I think it's potentially, I mean, I would be interested in talking about it theoretically. I don't think it's like planned for V3 at the moment. I think probably options token incentives are too expensive to do on mainnet. I think you'd have to do it on an L2, right? Because every option essentially is a
contract,
right? Yeah. It's gonna be, and then
you're definitely not doing that.
Yeah, it's gonna be super expensive, like just in terms of gas to claim them and stuff, and then to exercise them. But it's an interesting idea, and I haven't really seen anybody implement it super successfully yet. So it would be interesting to see where that goes.
Yeah, I think it's coming out right about now.
I'm really curious to see like the L2 integrations that you guys have in store for V3. Like there's some really cool applications I can think of where like you might be farming on mainnet, but then you get your yield on L2s and some multi-chain deployments. Like that might make options liquidity mining like more possible, and people wouldn't have to port their liquidity over from mainnet. 𝗪𝗟, like, do you have any thoughts on like V3 and kind of where you see it going?
Or anything.
You mean in terms?
Or just anything, any thoughts? Yeah.
Yeah, just want to answer on previous questions about options, just some thought. Actually, I'm not sure that something similar could work on bear market, because like actually people in bear market, they put every risk against you. Yeah. So for example, if you are like protocol trying to put some more complicated stuff, and people just recalculate it in their minds and in more conservative and more negative way, because like, okay, it's bear markets, everything is dumping, it's bad. And you can actually screw it up using such kind of difficult tools, and the result will be nothing or even negative. While in bull market that could work much better, because in bull market everybody like very optimistic. Every token goes to the moon. So like they can play in these games in their mind and think that okay, this derivative could like make me rich later. So it actually could work for protocol very, very positive way. So yeah, that's actually like what came to my mind when thinking about it. Yeah,
I mean, it works in a bull because it's like call options, so the users get, I mean, they have this incentive to not dump because they're constantly farming these, and they can get shorter term ones or longer term options, and they're basically like, well, if I have this one that's shorter term, this one that's longer term, I can claim this, but then I don't really want to dump my tokens because I want the price to stay up for the next set of options that I have that are going to expire soon. So it's an interesting concept, but I think we're going to kind of wrap up here. Guys, thank you so much for coming on. It was an absolute pleasure. I feel like we didn't get to all the topics that I wanted to, some of the more degen ones, but I think we took a better route and kind of went technical and very kind of important DeFi narratives and kind of mental models. So yeah, again, thank you guys.
Thanks a lot for having us. Happy to come on anytime to talk anything degen, anytime you want.
Nice.
Let's do it again soon.
Yep.
Cheers, guys. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks.
Cheers. Thank you.